Hello and welcome back to the game room. You know what I love? Video games. You know what I love talking about? Games. I love playing them. I love gaming. And what's funny is a lot of people who talk about games nowadays seem to hate them. Well, not here, and not the 1,497 of you people who have joined us in this journey of talking about games from all the different generations. And you know what I wanted to talk about today? The GameCube. Now, specifically, I'm focusing on two-player GameCube games, but a lot of these are going to be four-player games that are pretty fun as well. But let's not waste any more time vamping. Let's get to the games.
There's a lot of games out there, some of which you've never even heard of. That's where I come in. My name's Luke. I've been playing games since the age of 2, and I have no life. This is my game room.
Now, much like I always try to do, I don't want to focus too much on the GOATs, but there are certain game series that you can't be ignored, so we're going to just briefly mention them. You know, obviously, when talking about the GameCube, even though this is a bit of a divisive title, depending on who you're talking to, there is Mario Kart Double Dash, which is a phenomenal two-player game. In my opinion, probably one of the best versions of Mario Kart for two people, specifically because there is a Grand Prix mode that allows you to play through every single track in one giant tournament. And my dad and I used to do this all the time. And it takes about, I want to say about an hour, 45 minutes. And it is so fun going through all the tracks, being super competitive, going back and forth, trading blows. Unfortunately, that mode isn't available on 4-player, because you also have the computers in it. So it was just a really fun, interesting mode to play at, and one of my favorite ways to play. Now, there is an option to play up to 8 people, I believe, in this, where you have one person controlling the back, one person controlling the front. Double Dash isn't my favorite. It's not my favorite mechanic of the games, but it is enjoyable. I remember we tried playing it with with both of us on the same car, and I didn't like it that much. But still, gotta mention Mario Kart Double Dash, and probably the other one that I'd be remiss to talk about now. This one's probably more enjoyable for me with 4-player, but that is Super Smash Bros. Melee, the game that introduced myself to Fire Emblem with Marth and Roy. I remember unlocking them and be like, who the hell are these sword guys? Oh my god. And yes, you can play it 2-player mode where you're having 2-player duels, but if you're not playing against someone of equal caliber, unless you just love whooping up somebody, which, don't get me wrong, it is fun owning some noobs, but it does lose its appeal after a while for me. I always preferred the 4-player Melee stock match where you're just going crazy and gotta watch your back constantly. But yes, Melee, gotta mention Melee. Now, I only have one of the Mario Parties, Mario Party 4, but yes, the Mario Parties, I'm still particularly fond of the N64 ones, and actually Mario Party 8 on the Wii. I actually really like Mario Party 8 on the Wii. But yes, you got the Mario Parties, gotta mention those. Let me know if I should pick up 5, 6, and 7, or if there's anything really cool about it. Because honestly, I feel like I did play them, but I want to say my little brother owned those games. And then, yes, the Mario Sports titles. So here I'm talking about Mario Golf. Although I swore I had the soccer game and I thought I had the tennis game, but no, I just have the golf game. So, yes, another great one. All right, let's get to the more obscure games. Now, not all of them are obscure, but let's start off with me breaking my own rules already. So one of the Mario Sports titles that is particularly fun for 2 players is pretty much the only baseball game I've really enjoyed post Baseball Stars, outside of a couple of exceptions, and that is Mario Baseball Mario Superstar Baseball. That's what it is. Did they have I don't think they've released another Mario baseball game. I'm pretty sure this is the only one, and it's a solid baseball game. It's really fun. I mean, at this time in the mid 2000s when this came out, baseball games really started getting with the clutter of the simulation, and this was the first baseball game I had played that really evoked that NES. The pitch is thrown, you hit the button and it hits it. You don't have to worry about moving in the zone. You know, there's a little bit of off-speed pitches, but for a 2-player experience, baseball is always a good one. There's not too much you have to worry about. You don't have to know all the play calling like in football, the team management like in basketball. And this was just a very fun time. One of my more enjoyable Mario sports titles. And funny because they really have not gone back to the baseball since then. And I'm sure that's one of the next games coming that will be released this summer with very little content that then gets added over the course of years. But that is what we're looking at. Now, a particularly good one, in my opinion, not just for 2-player, but for 4-player, but a game that we had been waiting for my whole life. I loved Godzilla. I loved that whole kaiju stuff, Mechagodzilla, all that. I picked up games like King of the Monsters and Godzilla on the NES, and I was really looking for that Godzilla definitive experience, and they finally delivered it with Godzilla Destroy All Monsters Melee. And this game has all the guys you want to play as, has these big destructible environments that are fun to throw people through, and funnily enough is a fighting game, but it doesn't feel like a fighting game as much as it just feels like a fun time. I mean, you can have crazy 4-player in this, but the one-on-one battles are just as enjoyable, and you got all the mega monsters, even ones that I wasn't aware of because I didn't see the Destroya and all the other later Godzilla movies, which I really should go back and watch. But just such a good game. Very, very underrated in my opinion, even though I do know that this game has its fans. It might be my favorite Godzilla game. Now, I haven't played the 2014 one or the one on the Wii, but I know the 14 one was hated. So this if you want some Godzilla action, this is definitely the one to pick up, and it's super, super enjoyable. Now, I love me some GoldenEye, and I spent years chasing that high of a James Bond game, and after Tomorrow Never Dies was a letdown and The World Is Not Enough was decent, they didn't have a game coming out for Die Another Day because I guess they lost the license, or Pierce Brosnan didn't want to use his likeness anymore. But there was a game that came out fairly early on in the GameCube life cycle called James Bond Agent Under Fire. And this is actually a very good 2-player game. Much like Perfect Dark had the ability to play with computers, you can play a 4-player deathmatch with 2 humans and then fill the rest with computers. Now, they weren't as excruciatingly hard as the ones in Perfect Dark, but in my opinion was better because of that. And just the ability you could use a thing and jump up in the air. I think there was jetpacks even. It's a surprisingly fun deathmatch, and my dad and I had a great time playing this back in the day. Story mode was it wasn't the great, not having that recognition of and also it's 4-player too if you want to play it. Not having its recognition. Now, a lot of people might say that Nightfire is the better game. I actually have no experience with Nightfire. I think it's made by the same people, and it basically, that's part of the reason why I didn't buy it. It's like, why am I going to buy another one? I had my fill with the first one. And yet another game not based on Die Another Day. I don't even know if there is a Die Another Day James Bond game, but they got Brosnan back, so I'm not sure what happened there. But I would imagine it has a similar play style to Agent Under Fire. I'm just pretty partial to Agent Under Fire, which is also a very affordable game too. I mean, a lot of these ones I'm going to be talking about are not cheap, as GameCube prices have gone up, but some of them are pretty reasonable. Speaking of one that is very reasonable, is probably my favorite beat 'em up post the NES, SNES generation, and maybe still true to this day, which was Lord of the Rings Return of the King. And this is another one of those games where I, through my collecting, think I picked it up on also the PS2 and the Xbox, so it's not exclusive. Not all these are going to be GameCube exclusives. But this is a super fun beat 'em up. It has a progression system, much like, say, Knights of the Round, but because you can save, you can permanently have it. You can unlock secret characters. It doesn't have Boromir in it. It has Faramir, which I was bummed about because I love Sean Bean. But another solid game. It's not 3-player co-op, but 2-player co-op, and it is solid. Once again, Dad and I would play this all the time, and is a very good representation of the series as well, especially when it came out. This was kind of at the height of the Lord of the Rings power. I think this game was released in 2003, or maybe it was even earlier than that. For some reason, I don't remember the Fellowship game. I don't remember the Two Towers being anything, but when this one came out, they must have just gotten something right, because I picked it up, everyone picked it up, and it is Game Boy Advance compatible. I don't know what for or how, but of all the games on this list that are probably the highest recommendations for being affordable and fun, this one is it. This one, especially, and even if you love the series, it very well embodies the music and the feel of it. And it's just a really, really fun time. So I can't say enough good things about Lord of the Rings Return of the King on GameCube, or any of the other ones. Now here's a GameCube exclusive that you may not think of when you think of multiplayer, and it's not the best multiplayer, but I have very fond memories with it, just like I have fond memories of the series in a whole. There is a 4th version coming out later this year, and that is Pikmin 2. Now, Pikmin 2 specifically, the first one did not have any multiplayer, but there is a multiplayer option in this game that allows you to do almost a one-on-one battle, if I remember, where you're competing for resources, and I don't know if you have any direct combat or if it's trying to be the person who collects the items before the other one. It's been a while since I played it, but it's solid. It's a solid 2-player experience, and you know, I never got to play this against someone who poised much of a challenge, because once again, I would play, especially in this era, it was me playing with my dad, unless it was the 4-player games, and then we'd play the competitive stuff. So this was one where he did his best, but it just, you know, there's only so much if you don't know the honey does this or how to grow that or what the better strategy, what the Pikmin do. But it's a solid thing. Unfortunately, this game is super pricey now. I think there are other ways to play it. I think there's a Wii version. It might still be cheap, but let's see if Pikmin 4 comes out with something similar. I mean, I'd love to play through the main game with a second player. That'd be super cool. But this was a solid, a solid thing where you could play it with another player. And I love Pikmin. I can't say enough good things about Pikmin. Now, here's a funny one. I thought I bought this game new. I've talked about it before, but Simpsons Road Rage has a 2-player simultaneous mode, but in my opinion, it is far better to do an alternating, almost arcade style, where, you know, one person has a run, the other one person has a run, because that's, once again, what my dad and I did. We had a back and forth competition for a high score. He would get 30,000, I would get 31. He would get 40,000, I would get 41. He would get 43, I get 44. He got 45. And then one day, the heavens aligned, and I had the run of a lifetime where I almost broke the game. I couldn't fail. I was playing as Professor Frink on, I want to say, the city level, and I knew the route so well that I was able to keep the timer going infinitely. I think I got it up to a 2-hour timer. That's how well I was doing. And I got all the way up to 144,000. It was insane. And I still have it on the memory card. I still have that score. And when my dad saw it, he was just disgusted. He was like, well, all right, you win. And I always did that. I would always do too much of a dominating victory, and we didn't continue with that. And that was a really fun memory of mine that I still talk about. But here's the funny thing. There's a U sticker on this, and then inside there's a note that says, "Thank you for purchasing it from something on Amazon." Now, this was something that when I was in college, my little brother would play my GameCube games, and I do think to this day that some games went missing, like my memory of the soccer game and my WrestleMania 18 that went missing. But some games stopped working. You know, Harvest Moon, It's a Wonderful Life stopped working, and my original disc of Melee stopped working, and my parents bought replacement copies of them. I'm wondering if that happened with this, because I know this was another game he was playing. So kind of strange on that, but then again, I could be misremembering it, because hey, if I got this game for $15, that was a hell of a deal. Alright, now this one, I'm not a huge fighting game guy, but you gotta talk about just Soul Calibur II alone because it has Link in it. This was a really cool get. Very cool concept back in the day where you had exclusive characters for each console. So the PlayStation got the Kratos, Xbox got Spawn, which was kind of the lamest of all of them. Nothing against Spawn, but it wasn't... Xbox didn't really have a huge mascot yet. It was a little too early to have Master Chief. Probably if the game had come out a few years later, it would have been Master Chief. And then we got Link. And Link in it was fun. Now, I wasn't very good at this. I would always just ring out people, and that's how I would win. But the only Soul Calibur experience I really had, because once again, I'm not a big fighting game guy, but another solid 2-player game. And I think it's still pretty cheap, too, because everyone wanted the one with Link. That was one of the, like, it was the first time you really saw Nintendo experimenting with other companies and it wasn't complete garbage. So that was cool. Now, one that cannot be said about how great it is, really the spiritual successor to GoldenEye, was a game called Time Splitters 2. I know a lot of the same people who made GoldenEye worked on this. The multiplayer is fantastic. You can have robots in there just like Agent Under Fire, but do so much more. There's so many different character skins. You can have different modes. It's zany, it's wacky, and it's still fairly affordable to get it complete. If you like multiplayer couch co-op, it's not just 2-player, you can do 4-player. Time Splitters 2, and also has a phenomenal single-player campaign. I probably should have put it in my surprisingly good single-players thing, because this game, in my opinion, is better than Future Perfect. Having played through Future Perfect recently, I still say Time Splitters 2 is the definitive Time Splitters experience, and well worth a playthrough if you ever have the time. Alright, got a few left. Now, I spoke about Def Jam Fight for New York when I said surprisingly good single player, but obviously this is a phenomenal 2-player game. You can do 4-player simultaneous, but I still prefer the 2-player. And one of my favorite stories was me and my buddy David, who had our own characters, because you can create your own characters and do the stats, and we would have, much like the Road Rage, we would go back and forth on who was the best. And one day I learned the counter system so well, and we were those jerks who, when you would figure something out, you wouldn't tell the other guy how to do it. You would just exploit it and take advantage. And it was a little different than the counter system, the way it worked on No Mercy. I can't remember the exact timing, but that day I was locked in. And to the point where he thought I was cheating or broken or something was wrong, and I beat him like 20 matches in a row. No joke. 20 matches in a row, and we never played again. And even though he may have been better at me at Melee, because he was playing as Falco, well, he can never take the fact. And he denied it years later. He'd be like, oh, what are you talking about? That didn't happen. I'm like, nah, it did. It did. And here we have it for posterity. I'm pretty sure I talked about it before. All right, I'm breaking the rules a little bit here again. Now, there's a game called Gladius that is one of my all-time favorite tactics games that no one talks about. And it's not exclusive. It's on the Xbox. It's on the PS2. And this was the first game I played after Final Fantasy Tactics that was a tactical style, because I didn't know what to look for. There's a multiplayer component that I've never played. It's 4-player alternating, but the fact that it exists, I'm throwing it in this video just because I want to talk about some Gladius. So yes, highly recommend Gladius. It is a wonderful game and deserves to get played by you, my friends. All right, down to the last 3. Now, unfortunately, this sequel to the original, well, not the original, but the N64 original, is not as good by any stretch. I don't know why, and the series kind of phased out after that, but Wave Race Blue Storm, it was an early GameCube release. One of the only ones that was a multiplayer game when the GameCube came out, because you had stuff like Rogue Leader and Luigi's Mansion. But this one was really the multiplayer game, and it was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. Not as good as the N64 one, but still, it just didn't quite capture the magic. But that's not saying it was a bad game whatsoever. And I enjoyed my time with Wave Race Blue Storm. All right, last 2. So the last 2 we got here are a little bit of a tricky situation. So the first one is Final Fantasy Crystal Chronicles. Now, I can't tell you how excited I was when we finally got a Final Fantasy. I mean, when the GameCube came out, it really felt like Nintendo was coming back, because we got Resident Evil exclusive. We're getting a Final Fantasy again, but they were very, very careful to say that this is not like the Final Fantasy VII's Tactics or anything. It was a new style of game, and boy, was it. You carry a crystal chalice around. Now it's up to 4 players, but in order to do 4-player mode, you have to have 4 Game Boy Advances with, or not 4, 3, I believe. 3 Game Boy Advances, or maybe it's 4. It might be 4. You have to have 4 Game Boy Advances with a plugged-in link cable in order to see your menu. And it's funny because on the thing it says 1 to 4 players simultaneous, but I only ever did this with a second player, my buddy Sean. Now, ironically, we played through this and we actually beat the game, but when we beat the game, we were on the last boss. We had started the last boss maybe 3 minutes in, and his mom said, it's time for dinner. And so he went off to eat, and I spent the next 30 minutes playing with both controllers, and I actually managed to beat it without his help, because his character had an ability to put themselves invulnerable, and that somehow allowed me to beat the game. And he came back after he ate, and the credits were rolling, and I'm like, yeah, we did it. He's like, oh, well, guess we beat it. Hilarious. One of the weirdest ways I've ever beaten a game. This was an early Square Enix release too, when they just merged. But that leads me to my final game, which by Nintendo, funnily enough, Zelda 4 Swords Adventure does a similar thing to Crystal Chronicles, but on the back here it says it's 1 player, versus Crystal Chronicles says it's 4 player, even though you need to do the same damn thing. So a little that's how Crystal Chronicles got you. I was a little vague about how you had to do it. I remember when getting it, it was like, wait, you can't do anything without someone having that? It was a bit of a bummer. But Four Swords Adventure is actually a lot of fun, and unfortunately, I wish they would do a remake or a re-release of this, because this would be a super fun game to play through with 4 people. Or even 2 people. I think I played a little bit of 2 people, much like we did Crystal Chronicles, but I can't tell you for sure. But still, it has that Link to the Past art style, and was a full-fledged game that came out after they released this sort of almost side story minigame thing attached to the Link to the Past Game Boy re-release. And it's just, you know, I loved seeing Nintendo do stuff like this, and unfortunately once the Wii came out, they kind of got away from it until around the 3DS era and now the Switch. So yeah, there you go. That is a glut of games for the GameCube that are really fun multiplayer, but also really solid 2-player multiplayer if that's all you have access to. Alright guys, well, it's been so nice seeing you here. Welcome to all the new people. We are 3 subscribers away from 1,500. If we hit it, who knows? Maybe my head will explode. But yeah, let me know what GameCube games that you would recommend, if there's anything I left out. And as always, it's been so nice getting a hold of you. Take care.